Thermostone is easy to lay yourself. Let's take a close look at the tools you'll need. A scraper, a chalk line, a small paintbrush, 2 Naturo rollers, a knife, a hammer, a square and a piece of hardboard. We recommend that you watch this video all the way through before commencing laying. It's essential that you use the correct Thermostone products shown here for installing and maintaining the tiles. We'll cover each product in detail in this video. Detailed fitting instructions are clearly set out in the step-by-step instruction leaflet contained in the Thermostone fitting and maintenance kit. In order for the adhesive and lacquer to dry quickly, room temperature should be at over 15 degrees centigrade and humidity should be below 80%. Existing flooring such as carpet, vinyl flooring, vinyl tiles or cork should first be removed. As with most flooring, in new buildings the concrete must be allowed to dry out under adequate ventilation at the rate of 2 weeks per centimetre of thickness before fitting Thermostone. The same applies to freshly cast cement screeds. If the base floor is a wooden floor, check that the floor is sufficiently stable. Nail down any loose-fitting planks and, if necessary, lay a levelling floor. Use a nail punch to knock down any protruding nail heads. Plane off any high spots and fill any gaps between boards. As with most hard flooring, the floor must be completely dry, smooth, level, stable and even. In the case of concrete and cement screed floors, level out any unevenness greater than 2 mm per metre. Any cracks, troughs or low spots must be filled with a suitable latex floor levelling compound. If the floor changes level, you're unable to remove previous hard flooring or it's not already fairly smooth, you'll need to lay a latex screed over the whole floor. Your concrete floor should then be sanded all over to remove high spots or rough areas. If your floor is concrete or a cement screed, use either a house brick or a carborundum stone if you have one. When you've finished, your subfloor should look like this, perfectly smooth. Now that your subfloor is prepared, vacuum the floor thoroughly to remove all the dust and grit and make sure there are no grease or adhesive residues. Like a ceramic floor, unless the room is very small, Thermostone is installed from the middle of the room to the edge of the room. So first you need to work down a wall to find the center point. Once you've found the center point of the first wall, take a tile and mark out the tile widths from this center point to the corner to make sure that you'll end up with over half a tile width in the end row. If not, adjust your mark at the center point of the room to ensure that one side of the room ends up with over half a tile. Then use the same measurement for your center point of the opposite wall. Using a chalk line, make a line across the center of the room by joining up these 2 marks. Then use a tape measure to find the center point of this chalk line, and this will give you your starting point when you commence laying. The tiles will be laid one side of the room at a time. Before doing so, check to see whether the door needs trimming by sliding a tile underneath. Now you're ready to apply adhesive to the first half of the room. For this, only Thermostone adhesive must be used and applied with the plain roller and the small paintbrush from the installation kit. After vacuuming the floor again thoroughly, apply the contact adhesive around the edges of the room with the small paintbrush. For the main area of the room, use the roller, taking care to ensure that it's applied thinly and evenly, and cover the whole area up to just over your chalk line. Take care not to walk on the adhesive or to get any dust on the backs of the tiles, as this will affect the adhesion. The adhesive takes between 1 and 2 hours to dry, depending on room temperature. If you place the roller and brush in a plastic bag, you can reuse them later for the other half of the room. Although they don't feel tacky, there's no need to apply adhesive to the backs of the tiles, as Thermostone already comes with it pre-applied. This adhesive is activated when it comes into contact with the adhesive on the floor. Commence laying the tiles when the adhesive on the floor has dried transparent. Begin by mixing up tiles from at least 3 different packs, checking each pack before laying. The first tile is placed with a corner against the point marking the center of the room, with the long side of the tile carefully aligned along the chalk line. Take care not to put any pressure on the tile until you're happy that it's correctly aligned. If it needs realigning, simply pick it up and realign it correctly. To ensure good adhesion and tight joints, thermostone is tapped down with a clean-headed hammer with no sharp edges. This must not be a rubber mallet, as this will mark the tiles. After that, you can begin laying the next tile in the row along the chalk line. The 60 by 45 centimeter tiles are directional, and therefore take care to ensure that the V shape in the natural pattern of the tile is always facing the same direction, preferably with the open end of the V facing towards the window. For the best effect, the staggers should run across the main doorway. Press the tiles tightly together so that there's no space between them. This ensures that the lacquer thoroughly seals the joints against water and dirt. Thermostone is extremely flexible, so if you've not managed to get the joint tight enough, you can use the flat head of the hammer to pull or push the tile and close the gap. Or again, taking care to use the flat head of the hammer, tap along the joint to close it. It should look like this, with no gap at all. Continue laying the tiles end on end, taking care to press the tiles tightly together. Continue along the chalk line until you've fitted the last full tile in the row. It's usually better to lay all the full tiles first and then leave all the cutting in around the edges till later. To start the next row, go back to the first tile you fitted and mark your start point at halfway along this tile. This gives the stretcher bond or staggered tile effect. Take care to get a tight fit between the rows of tiles. Continue laying the rows until you fitted all the full tiles on this side of the room. Here's an important point to remember. Thermostone is an extremely robust material and can withstand quite strong impacts, but you must ensure that you tap the tile with the flat head of the hammer. Never hammer edge on or use excessive force. To cut the tiles in around the edges, there's an easy technique. Place a tile directly on top of the last full tile in the row. Then place another tile on top of this one, but this time right up against the skirting. Mark the overlap with a pencil line, then using a straight edge and a piece of hardboard, cut along this line. This piece should fit snugly into the space. Now simply smooth and tap the piece down. Here are 3 important tips on cutting a tile in. The first tip is that because the 60 by 45 centimeter tiles must be fitted in the same direction, you need to reverse the direction of this second tile so that it'll be the right way around when you make the cut piece and put in place. The second tip is that when you place the second tile directly on the first, move it 1 millimeter away from the wall. That way, when you cut it and put it in place, the piece will be just a fraction larger than the space, giving a perfect finish around the edge of the room. And the third tip is to cut the tile at 45 degrees, leaving the surface of the tile proud from the base. Again, this helps to give that perfect finish. Corners are dealt with in the same way as edges, except that you'll need to mark and cut 2 edges. Mark and cut the first edge as before. Then line up the other edge, mark it, and cut it. Chimney breasts and internal corners are just as easy to fit around using the same procedure. Once you've applied the adhesive to the other side of the room and allowed it to dry, this second side can be laid as before. Before applying lacquer, check the floor to ensure that you've closed any gaps in the joints between tiles. Provided they're not too wide, these gaps can be easily closed by stretching the tile with a hammer and then tapping along the joint. If you've not fitted some of the tiles closely enough, don't worry. Simply apply some of the coloured touch-in lacquer along the joint, then wipe off the excess. The floor can be walked on straight away without the need to leave the adhesive to dry, but the floor must be completely clear of dust, grease and grit before lacquering. Vacuum the floor thoroughly. Mop the floor all over with clean water to remove any dusty footprints. Then make sure that the bottoms of your shoes are clean. This prevents any dust and dirt from being sealed into the floor by the lacquer. Thermostone is already pre-finished with 2 coats of lacquer, but a further coat must be applied after laying to give the floor its water resistance and extra wear properties. Only Thermostone special lacquer should be used. Take the striped roller, trim the edges with a pair of scissors, and then use a vacuum cleaner to get rid of all the lint and fluff. We recommend that you attach a broom handle so that you have a clear view while you're lacquering. It's essential that you purchase and apply to the floor the full quantity recommended by your Thermostone retailer. Shake the lacquer thoroughly and pour it into the Thermostone bucket. Use a paintbrush at the skirting boards to apply the lacquer. Don't worry if you get some lacquer on the skirting, as it dries clear. Then use the roller on the whole floor area. Apply the lacquer in a thick coat, but make sure that you apply it evenly over the whole floor without leaving pools or ridges of lacquer, as this will show up on the finished floor. You should be applying enough lacquer to fully seal every beveled joint. If you're unable to apply all the lacquer in one application, wait for the first coat to dry and then apply the second coat. Depending on room temperature, you should be able to recoat in 6 to 8 hours. You must make sure that the floor is completely dry, and before another application, the floor must be cleaned. Providing that the lacquer is applied evenly, it's always better to over-lacquer than to under-lacquer, particularly in heavy wear areas. In areas like hallways, we recommend doubling the lacquer application. Ventilate the room well to improve drying time of the lacquer. All that you need to do now to complete the installation is to apply the polymer finish. This is an essential finish that helps to protect Thermostone against household stains. Before applying polymer, you should allow at least 24 hours after application of the lacquer. If the floor has been walked on since lacquering, wash it with clean water and allow the floor to dry. Shake the bottle of polymer thoroughly before application. Pour a small amount directly onto the floor undiluted, then simply wipe it over the whole surface area of the floor using a damp, lint-free cloth. Wipe in one direction, taking care to ensure that you don't miss any areas. Apply very thinly, but make sure that every part of the floor is covered evenly, including the beveled edges. Leave for at least 1 hour and then reapply the polymer in the opposite direction that you applied the first coat. This ensures an even finish. The polymer should be dry and ready to walk on in approximately 1 hour. Take care to ensure that nothing comes in contact with the floor until it's completely dry. If Thermostone is fitted carefully, you should end up with a perfect finish around the edge of the room. However, if there are any gaps, use an acrylic decorating sealant to seal the edges. You must not use a silicone sealant, or any product containing silicone.